Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. The things are not going Russia's way on the front lines as they would want it. We already covered a lot of Ukrainian counteroffensive actions that were ongoing the past couple of weeks. You can watch some of the videos this week to recap in a little bit more details. But we're still going to touch on those, and we're going to go over the front line to see and understand what's the situation on the front line and what we should expect and pay attention to. First thing that we need to acknowledge is that things are really bad for Russia. Now, Russia wants to paint this narrative that they are massively winning, that they are completely dominating the front line. And while the statistics on contacts and fights ongoing on the front line is about the same, what is not the same is data that shows the advances on the front lines that are achieved by Russia. As you can see, there is a weekly advance. So there was in January 27 kilometers, then it was 90 square kilometers, then it was 61, 30, and last week only 12 square kilometers, which is only 2 square kilometers per day. That is probably the lowest tempo of advances we saw Russia do in a very, very, very long time. We're talking years here. So what you need to understand is, despite the fact that Russia is still putting a lot of pressure on Ukrainian front line, the success they're getting is definitely not there. This is altogether coming with the fact that they are now closing all of their major pockets. There's also some preparation on the front line, but let's just jump in and go over everything point by point. First things first, some talks about the northern part around Kharkiv. Here we have a weird situation where Ukrainians and Russians are doing some small activities in this area right over here. There are a couple of settlements. And from kind of week in, week out, we see first Ukrainians, then Russians, then Ukrainians again, then Russians again, kind of plant the flag, take some pictures, and then go back. So it's not that the fighting is not going on here. It's just the gray area in this part of the front line has not been outlined as much as it is on the east. But basically, Russians here are not advancing. And if you hear Russians planting or capturing anything at the north, just know that this is just an exchange of different opinions. Around Kupiansk, Russians are still, and Russian general staff are still claiming that they're fully in control of city, that they actually captured all of this area. If you look at their maps, Ukrainians have produced more videos of their operations inside of Kupiansk. Some of the Ukrainian soldiers posted more videos of them chilling in these positions that supposedly Russia captured as well, where they are bravely just walking in their casual attire. So overall, Russia is still having some little presence around Kupiansk, but it is very much dwindling, and whatever forces are there, they're just supplied by airdrops. But it has been already going on for a while. Russia wanted to try to claim this week that they achieved some kind of success in this southern part of Liman operating zone. Remember, Liman is the kind of #1 target over here. And Russia wanted to claim, but then Ukrainians showed that no, Russia actually didn't advance. So overall, this whole area have been pretty much no-go for Russia, which is good. Russia is critical this year. If they want to achieve anything, they need to get Liman. So no action in this operational zone is really good for us, because it basically means that Ukrainian stronghold holds and Russia cannot really achieve the things that they desire. Then let's talk about Siversk direction. Here, the target for Russia is obviously they want to reach the eastern side of Slaviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration, the main fortress of Ukrainians, and they're advancing from east to west. It's a very hilly area right over here. There's 3 major long hills. You will actually see some of that video when I release my video going to Kramatorsk. Yes, I was over here if you're watching me for the first time. And in this area, it is expected that Russia will continue their advances. It is expected that Alexandrivka at some point will be captured by the Russians. And overall, analysts are stating that right now Russia is preparing for the major push that they will be doing most likely closer to summer, late spring, summer. And here expectations are that Ukrainians will build their defense based on some of the natural locations. There is this water storage facility, and then there is this a little bit of a stream sort of that goes down here and kind of delimits this hilly area with a stream. So expectations are that Ukrainians will build up the fortification and a hitting line on this area, and while Russians will continue advancing eastwards, right now they are still not really crossing it, and they don't have a proper crossing secured. So there is still a proper defense barrier that is at least expected on paper to be there. But generally speaking, even the advances Russia is having here are very marginal and slow overall. Next area we need to touch upon is Konstantinivka, Chasiv Yar. Russia obviously have captured Chasiv Yar many months ago, but in reality Ukrainians are still active in Chasiv Yar area, which is located right over here. Sorry, I forgot that I'm now on the right, so I need to move the map a little bit. Yes, Chasiv Yar is located right over here, and you can see that on this map is very clearly stated that Russians are still not able to control this southwestern area of Chasiv Yar, and they specifically want to reach Konstantinivka, that is now kind of gateway town towards further advances towards Kramatorsk, Sloviansk from this direction. Now, here a couple of things happened. Firstly, Russians have conducted a couple of their assaults going from south direction, from east-southern direction. And right now, reports are that about 1/4 of Konstantinivka is already a combat zone between Russians and Ukrainians. Mostly this is obviously talking about the southeastern zone of Konstantinivka. But more importantly, Russians have actually used a big bomb to destroy a dam in this small water holding facility. And because of that dam explosion, there is now a little bit of spill of water in this area. It's not a big storage facility. There was not that much water. So it's going to be problematic for Ukrainians because it is blocking the main road. There are other roads that are leading to Konstantinivka, but it is creating some of the issues with logistics. So we will most likely for the next week might see Russians more actively focus on Konstantinivka, as right now there is a little bit of hindrance for Ukrainian logistics. Around Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, we heard some of the Ukrainian bloggers already stating that generally speaking, both Pokrovsk and Mirnograd are pretty much under Russian control. Also, Rodinske is more or less under Russian control, and Grishine is right now being contested by Russians. And while it is true, there have been also some videos showing that it is fighting for some areas close to these cities. Ukrainian command is claiming that fighting for this agglomeration is still ongoing. However, I tend to agree with some of the Ukrainian bloggers stating that, generally speaking, the defense of these towns has been concluded, and overall we see exactly what we were saying before, that even if Russia takes Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, it's not that they suddenly just going to break through, because the war has changed and now they are going to be suffering no matter what. It was a great defense of Ukrainians for almost 2 years. These areas have been defended, and now Russia have taken, bringing them absolutely zero victory potential and just sacrificing a lot of Russians to now go forward against moving 2 square kilometers a week and leaving tens of thousands of Russians dead. And now we get to the fun part. If we move towards south, the first area, which is this one right over here. Russia have been advancing on this southern part, so I'm monitoring it quite closely. Not that there is a lot of strategically important things here. Multiple times I underscored that while Russia is advancing on this area, there are no strategically critical positions here. I mean, losing every meter of Ukrainian land is critical, we know that, but if we're talking kind of that Ukrainian goal is to win the war over Russia and Russian goal is to take over Ukraine, then this is not helping Russia that much. In any case, even in this area that is not that much of a priority, Ukrainians are having pretty good success. Russia has been trying to move past the defensive positions of Ukrainians in this area many, many times. For example, they've been moving northwards towards Novopavlivka many times, and they have been trying to break through. However, Ukrainian defense positions in Novopavlivka are strong and have been strong. Recently, Ukrainians again verified that it is still under control. And in general, here we see quite a nice Ukrainian chain of defensive position, which is Novomykolaivka, Muraivka, Novopavlivka, Ivanivka, Iskra, Alexandrograd. And you see that this is a pretty strong defensive line that Ukrainians are holding here, and Russians have been really trying to break through it, but so far it seems that Ukrainians have found the weak spot for Russians around this area, and they're not able to advance whatsoever. And moving even more south, this is where we're getting into the actual nightmare for the Russians. Now, given that Russians this week finally started understanding that something is going on, and losing some ground in this area that they supposedly controlled before, now they're starting to direct some of the forces to fight Ukrainians that are advancing from this northern area. Beforehand, Russian goal overall here was to advance from east to west, because Ukrainian defensive positions here have been focused on controlling Russian advances from south towards north. So when Russians were able to kind of get to these positions from the side, this flanking created a lot of issues for Ukrainians. But now Ukrainians are flanking Russians. We saw a lot of pressure going on towards the Russians from Ukrainian side, specifically around this block over here. And pressure was coming from the north, and we already saw Ukrainians advance deeper into this northern part of the Russian pocket. There are a couple of areas that we know for sure. They're not yet shown on deep state map, but my hopes are that they will be in a very short time. Firstly, we saw Ukrainians kind of go in depth here around Ternovate, so that means that they basically control now all of this area, and there is now a big threat for going in depth of the Russian. Ukrainians moved from this part of the front line, Russians pretty much on very wide part. And there is additionally this push that is ongoing from Ukrainians. And right now we have confirmation around Solodke. So overall, the goal here is clear. If Ukrainians are able to move over to this position and capture this square, which is like kind of a lot of couple of cities here that are very densely packed, there is more importantly a very nice road that Russians are using. And if Ukrainians are able to cut this road, it will most definitely complicate the logistics of Russians that want to push further towards the west. Yet, if there is more and more pressure for Ukrainians from the north, especially when they're going to capture this square right over here, then suddenly it becomes real problematic, and potentially this whole operation is going to be multiplied by 0. Beyond that, additional Ukrainian counteroffensive actions that we know of are happening here around Stepnohirsk. Reports are that Ukrainians are trying to outflank it and trying to kind of essentially cut off this whole salient that Russians have created. Again, a lot of these activities are very tactically based. Ukrainians are just outplaying Russians. They're not dedicating that much forces. That is why I kind of agree with Ukrainians to not call it counteroffensive, but it's counteroffensive actions that are having success, and they're capturing Russians off guard, and definitely Ukrainians have found some way how to fight Russians more effectively. In some other really bad news for Russia, Firepoint has presented the tests of their new FP7 missile. It's a ballistic missile that is created in Ukraine, and it's a big game changer, obviously. A homemade Ukrainian missile focusing on cheap scalability. The reported range is about 300 kilometers, so it is about ATACMS, except much cheaper and more scalable at production. This is great news because Ukraine needs more homemade weapons, and some people commented on the video when I talked about flamingos and so on that it was just like some kind of Western missile. No, do not underestimate Ukraine. Yes, Western analysts and Western engineers have helped a lot in Ukraine, but all of these missile IP is owned by Ukrainians. It is their development. And if you don't think that Ukraine can develop their own missiles, you really need to read at least one Wikipedia article about how much weapons manufacturing is actually ongoing in Ukraine and how much the history of weapons manufacturing Ukraine has. Ukraine is a big, massive industrial country with a lot of know-how and potential. Then a couple of shout-outs. First one is to Jim Massa, that has won the flag of the 93rd Brigade that I brought from the East. I will link a video of me doing the raffle, so everything is transparent and you see how Jim got to be chosen for it. And more importantly, I also want to do a shout out to Phil for the great song Get Out, Get Out. It is truly fantastic. Thank you so much for making it. More support, more creativity for Ukraine. This is all that we need. And the support, the best one that you can do is obviously participate in our ongoing fundraiser. We are moving closer towards 200,000, a fantastic goal for our small but very dedicated community. Thank you. I love you so much. Trust in Ukraine, support Ukrainian armed forces. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.